Sorry, my dear brothers, for the mix-up. Let me give an audio mail. Then from there, maybe John can come out with a Zoom, and then we can discuss. Let me take us back to what I started from the onset. I started by saying that the text of Aristotle, we are dealing with that text. First, who was Aristotle? And we say Aristotle was a Greek philosopher during the classical period in ancient Greece. And we know that if we want to follow by the division which we have in ancient philosophy, we know that ancient philosophy is divided uh, into three periods. We have the pre-Socratics, we have the Socratics, and we have the post-Socratic. Therefore, Aristotle is a post-Socratic philosopher. And we know his relationship with Plato in the academy was one in which uh, Aristotle was a student of Plato. He assisted Plato in the academy, and when Plato died and there was an infighting as to who was going to take over from the academy, uh, the family of Plato had to shift Aristotle away, and his nephew, that's a nephew of Plato, Speusippus, took over the academy. It was from this, or it was in this line, or it is in this line that uh, Aristotle decided to step out and form his own school of philosophy known as the Lyceum. Known as the Lyceum. And then we say that Aristotle was born in 384 BC at Stagira. Stagira is a region in Greece, and he was a Stagirite. And he died in 322 BC at Ebao Island, which is also in Greece. And his spouse was Pythias. Pythias. Now, he was influenced by Plato, as we have seen his relationship with Plato in the academy. He was influenced by Plato, by Socrates, by Pythagoras, by Democritus, by Epicurus, Hippocrates, and Heraclitus. These are the philosophers who influenced Aristotle in his philosophy. Again, Aristotle also influenced other philosophers in philosophy. He influenced Immanuel Kant, René Descartes, Nicolaus Copernicus, Thomas Hobbes, and Ibn Sina. These are the people he influenced in philosophy. Now, what was the philosophical era of Aristotle? The philosophical era was one, ancient philosophy. That was his philosophical era at the level of ancient philosophy. And again, he was a pre-Socratic with Plato. And the third philosophical era was the peripatetic school of philosophy. I explained that the peripatetic school of philosophy was a teaching method whereby students did not sit in class formally, like a student will sit in class, listen to lectures, get the teacher talking, and then get his notes. No, the students used to sit in class the teacher used to take the student out of class, and they sit outside, and the teacher just give lectures orally. This was the same method that we are referring to as a peripatetic school, whereby Aristotle, Plato, ancient philosophers, they used to move while teaching, and the pupils or students used to follow them and to take lectures. And Plato described it as teaching in ambulation. Now, who were the notable students of this great philosopher we are studying? We have Alexander the Great, we have Theophrastus, we have Aristoxenus. These were the three notable students of Aristotle. Now, the main interest of Aristotle was biology, zoology, psychology, physics, metaphysics, logic, and ethics. And in the context of our course, we are taking one of that era, which is ethics, the era of ethics. And therefore, our interest in the course is on his ethics. And our text is the Nicomachean Ethics. Google will tell us that 82% of 82% like this book. That's Google users will tell us that 82% like this book, the Nicomachean Ethics. And again, we say that the Nicomachean Ethics is his best work, is Aristotle's best work on ethics. And what is ethics? The science of the good for human life, which is the goal or aim at which all our actions are aimed at. Therefore, the aim of inquiring is political science, politics, politicus, the police, the states. And therefore, if our behavior is to be examined or are to be examined, they are to be examined in the state when we live and interact with one another in the polis, in the states. Again, we say that the author of this text is Aristotle, and the original language is Greek. Now, what is the Nicomachean Ethics according to Aristotle? What is this text all about? The Greek philosopher Aristotle stated that the contemplative life consists of the soul's participation in the eternal. The soul's participation in the eternal. I remember that I took time here to explain that the eternal here, when we liken it to medieval philosophy, the eternal is linked or is likened or analogously linked to heaven. But in ancient philosophy, it was not heaven. We remember that the medieval philosophers, the Christian philosophers, they had to borrow some concepts from pagan philosophy. And in this light, we remember that Plato gave an insight to St. Augustine's philosophy and Aristotle to St. Thomas Aquinas' philosophy. So from this concept, we can know the concept of the eternal is a concept borrowed analogically to mean things of heaven in Christian philosophy. And therefore now, what we are saying here is that according to Aristotle, the contemplative life consists of the soul's participation in the eternal through the union between the soul's rational faculty and the nous that imparts intelligibility to the cosmos. And therefore, what we mean here is this. If we are to contemplate the eternal, what do we need? What is the assistance of the Nicomachean Ethics? The Nicomachean Ethics is telling us that we must be guided by actions, by good actions. Good actions. And from these good actions now, we know that it's taking us back to morality. Taking us back to the next question, what is the main focus of the Nicomachean Ethics? The main focus, according to Aristotle, is moral responsibility. If we are to follow things of the eternal, if we are to see things of the eternal, we must be morally responsible. And in this text, Aristotle notes that for us to be morally responsible, we must have been acting voluntarily, knowingly. In particular, two elements must be true. A person must be in true or in total control of his or her actions. And also, a person must be aware of what he or she is doing. When you know what you are doing, when you are aware, it's going to determine your the morality of what the morality of your act. Are you going to be responsible? Did you do it knowingly or unknowingly? Here we have crass ignorance and invincible ignorance involved. Again, why is the Nicomachean ethics important? Simple. It is important because it offers to the modern reader many valuable insights into human needs and conduct. Now, according to Aristotle, the moral virtues that can help us to be morally responsible, the moral virtues that can help us to know things of the eternal, as we have quoted, they are 11. They are courage, temperance, self-discipline, moderation, modesty, humility, generosity, friendliness, truthfulness, honesty, and justice. So if we are able to keep these moral virtues, then they are going to help us to be linked to things of the eternal. And for us to be linked to things of the eternal, we need to be morally responsible. Our human conduct must be backed by our moral responsibility. And in this line, this is all the main ideas that we'll be discussing in the text as we shall go ahead. So I will just stop here and maybe we go through it and discuss and see whether it is clear, or we discuss it as, like I was telling to John before others came. All of us have been teaching. Ajahn, I know, we have been teaching, and all these concepts, they are not different. But let's just discuss among ourselves now, and just to be sure that maybe what we have shared can enlighten us to know more about the Nicomachean ethics. Thank you. So I will just allow you to go through what I've said, and from there we can discuss. We can discuss either by short audios, or we can discuss either by just chatting, writing, and maybe what is not clear, and then from there we can see what to do, how to go with the class. If we were to have a network to have a Zoom discussion, it could have been wonderful. But let's see how this will take us to. Again, when you go back to the topics I shared, you see from book 1 where John is taking is happiness. So all our discussion here will be on happiness, and that is the main discussion on the Nicomachean ethics, the virtue of happiness. And like I said, there is something which we have in the Catholic University, PBL, problem-based learning, implying that what we are learning from Aristotle, the text, his understanding of happiness, is not something theoretical. We should see how it affects our life, how it affects our relationship with ourselves and with others. Are we responsible for our happiness? Do we give ourselves happiness? Do we make others happy? If we are able to answer these questions with a true reflection of what we have heard from Aristotle, then we are going to realize that our concept of happiness here is not theoretical. It is something practical. It is something that we should live on. It is something that it should be a problem-based learning that we are seeing how we can practicalize it, how we are living it. And therefore, that should be the direction of our studying of this happiness. It should not be only just to inculcate or just to repeat what Aristotle says about happiness, but it should be to see how these lived experiences of Aristotle, or how our lived experiences of happiness is in line with Aristotle's understanding of happiness. Can we learn something from there? Can we pick something from this concept of happiness of Aristotle and see how to help ourselves, either in our families, either in our friends, either in our relationships with others? We're able to do this and to know that we are responsible for all the happiness we have. Then I think this text will do good to us in what we are doing. So let's have some interaction. Thank you. Ethics, therefore, or the science of individual good, must be the groundwork of the rest. Families and states composed of individuals. It is plain from these considerations that ethics, according to Aristotle, form a subdivision of a great practical subject. He does not therefore consider it necessary to examine into the abstract nature of good, but only to pursue the investigation so far as it relates to man. The foundation of Aristotle's system of ethics is deeply laid in his psychological system. On the nature of the human soul, the whole fabric is built up and depends for its support. According to our author Aristotle, we are born with a natural capacity for receiving virtuous impressions and for forming virtuous habits. We are endowed with a moral sense, a perception of moral beauty, and an excellence and with acuteness on practical subjects which, when cultivated, is improved into prudence or moral wisdom. From all these considerations, it is plain that according to our author Aristotle, virtue is the law under which we are born, the law of nature, that law which if we won't attain to happiness, we are bound to fulfill. Happiness, according to Aristotle, in its highest and purest sense, is our being's end or aim or objective or purpose. If we can go back to our catechism classes when we were about to receive First Holy Communion, we were asked this question: why did God make me? And I think our answers were like this: God made me to know Him, to love Him, and to be happy with Him. Happiness crowns everything of God's love for us. Happiness is everything. And if we can go back to the Socratic dialectics, Socratic on virtue and knowledge, what does it tell us? That when you know everything, when you know yourself, you live a happy life. Man, know thyself, and you shall live a happy life. Therefore, happiness is the summum bonum of our being. This is also what Aristotle explains. Therefore, to Aristotle, it is the aim. Happiness is the aim of our being. It is the essence of our being. Man is endowed for virtuous energies, with capacity for moral action, with a natural taste and appreciation for that which is normally beautiful, with a natural disposition or instinct as it were to good acts, virtue and happiness becomes possible and attainable. Had this not been the case, all moral instruction would be useless. By repeated acts, habits are formed, either of virtue or vice, and therefore for this whole character, when formed as for each act which contributes to its formation, man is responsible. Man is responsible for his acts. Remember, acts of man and moral acts, or acts of man and acts that man are responsible, or say acts of man and human acts. So in the line of Aristotle, we are responsible for what we do. And what we do, which gives us happiness, is what should be our objective. So this is his understanding of happiness. What we are tackling in this analytical discussion is the virtue of happiness as one of the virtues of ethics that his philosophy is hinged on. His philosophy on the Nicomachean ethics is built on. Now, again, we say that the original language of this text is Greek. The original language is Greek. And being Greek, the translator was R.W. Browning. That was a translator, and he holds an MA and PhD degrees from Fellow of King's College London and Canon of Words in philosophy. The text proper, the publishing house, is in London. George Bell and Sons, New York Street, Covent Garden, 1889. It was printed by William Clouse and Sons, Limited, Stamford Street and Charing Cross. To the reader, the translator reiterates that every passage from the text, however, has been in all cases carefully compared with the original. The text generally followed has been that of Cantwell, but Becker's has been also consulted and his readings adopted where they appeared preferable. The notes are partly original and partly selected. Again, the translator has just given the necessary to the reader, the subject intelligible, and to explain or illustrate such difficulties as were incapable of being removed by the student. What you mean is that the translator has not gone line by line to tell us what this text is, but he has given to the reader the necessary subject intelligible and to explain or illustrate such difficulties as were incapable of being removed by the student. Now, the analytical introduction of the text. The analytical introduction of the text. Ethics, according to the theory of Aristotle, form but a subdivision of the great and comprehensive science of politics. Man is a political or social being. That science, therefore, which professes to investigate the subject of human good, study the nature of man, not only as an individual, but also in his relation to his fellows, as a member of a family, member of a state, member of a political family. Aristotle, therefore, following out this view, divides politics into three parts: ethics, economics, and politics. Good morning to Father Peter, our head of department. Good morning to Madame Anne, our executive assistant. Good morning to everyone. Last class, we had the introduction to our text, the text of Aristotle. And as a resume of what we said last class, we had an introduction of Aristotle, influences on Aristotle, influences on other philosophers by our author Aristotle, philosophical era of Aristotle, students, notables or his notable students, his main interests and ideas. And you also look at the introduction to the Nicomachean Ethics, what the Nicomachean Ethics is all about, why the Nicomachean Ethics is important, virtues of the Nicomachean Ethics, 11 of them, we saw them. And today we are going to go to the text proper, And again, what we said last class was that the Nicomachean Ethics is one of the best texts of Aristotle. I remember I intimated that 82% of Google users, they follow this book online. The Nicomachean Ethics, again, is Aristotle's best known work on ethics, the science of the good for human life, which is the goal or end at which all our actions are aimed. The aim of the inquiry of this text is political science, and the matter thicker than water. Yes, I would say blood is thicker than water. So in the course of infighting, we realize that the relations of Plato decided to take over the academy, and in this case, Plato's nephew, we call him Speusippus, took over the academy, and then that was how Aristotle was shifted to the background. And when Aristotle was shifted to the background, he decided to come now with his own philosophy known as, or his own school of philosophy known as the Lyceum. So we say that the founder of the Lyceum was Aristotle, and he was also the founder of the peripatetic school of philosophy. And again, we say that Aristotle was born in 384 BC at Stagira. Stagira is in Greece, and therefore a person from Stagira is called a Stagirite, and therefore Aristotle was a Stagirite. And he died in 322 BC at Ebao Island, still in Greece. Now, who was his spouse? We say that Aristotle's spouse was known as Pythias. Now, how did Aristotle get his philosophy? Who influenced him in his philosophy? Such as Plato, we have elaborated the relationship between Plato and himself in the academy. He was influenced by Pythagoras. He was influenced by Democritus in his philosophy. Hello, bro.
Yes, I can get you. Can you get me?
Yeah, I'm getting you. I'm getting very well. I was highlighting the three philosophical era of Aristotle. The first one is ancient philosophy. We have said that he was an ancient philosopher. Again, he belonged to what we call the peripatetic school. Was a school in ancient philosophy whereby teachers did not use to teach the students in a formal setting. Teachers used to teach in groves. I think calls ambulation. Ambulation means as you are teaching and moving, the students are behind you. They are following you. They are getting your lectures. So I don't know whether you experience that in the primary school, whereby the head teacher or the class teacher used to take his chair outside, and the student will sit on the grass, and the head teacher will be teaching, and they're sitting on the grass and they're listening to him, not necessarily in the clap of teaching, whereby the student used to move behind him as he was going. That is also his era, the era of peripatetic teaching. This is a teaching whereby students were not to sit in class formally using a projector or writing or using a computer, using a laptop. No. Students used to move behind the teacher, and then they are getting what the teacher is saying, and as the teacher is saying, they are going. And that's why we have the word ambulation. They are going and they are going. So this was one of the philosophical era of Aristotle. Now, who were his students? We have three notable students of Aristotle. The first one is the famous Alexander the Great that we know. Then we have Theophrastus, the second one, and the third one is what we call Aristozegnos. Aristozegnos. So these were his three notable students. We have one, Alexander the Great, two, Theophrastus, and three, Aristozegnos. These were his three notable students. Now, when we come to what is the main interest of Aristotle, what was his main interest? He was interested in zoology, psychology, he was interested and in ethics. So these were the areas of interest of Aristotle. And these areas of interest of Aristotle were put in three main theories, and they were seen in his aesthetics, they were seen in his ethics, and they were seen in his politics. So, from these areas, now gonna to our main interest in the text. Our main interest now from these his interests and from the ethics, we what we call his ethics, which is or which we're using the text, the Nicomachean ethics. Now, this Nicomachean ethics is one of the best works of Aristotle. Google will tell us that 82% like these books or this book. 82% of Google users, they like this text, the Nicomachean ethics. And we're going to realize that the Nicomachean ethics, it has a great impact to society, to us, to society. And the Nicomachean ethics, like we said, is his best known work on ethics. And ethics is what again? Ethics is the science of the good for human life. The science of the good for human life. Which is the goal or end at which all our actions are aimed. All our actions, they are aimed for us to have a good human life. A good human life. Permit me to go back to our last issues. You go back to last time, you realize that most of the arguments we have, most of the splitting that we have, that people tell in philosophy, is because we want to have a good human life, a good human relationship. And that's why you realize that when each person is touched, the person feels bad because the human life is touched. And therefore, our actions are tailored in such a way that at the end of the day, we can have a good human life. This is essentially one of the reasons why Aristotle came out with this text. So we say that the aim of the inquiry is therefore political science. You know, man is a political being. Man is a social being. Man is a political being. Political being is that man interacts with his fellow man in the police, in the states, and also in Lasta, we interact with one another as we know ourselves. As we know ourselves. Therefore, that's why you realize that at times we argue, at times we make fun, at times somebody is annoyed, at times somebody feels bad. That is man. That is man. That is who we are. We live in the states. And so again, the author of this text is Aristotle. And the original language of the text was in Greek. So all what we have now is a translation. All what we have now is a translation. And therefore, what is the Nicomachean Ethics according to Aristotle? After introducing the text, what is this text according to him? According to the Greek philosopher Aristotle, he stated that the contemplative life consists of the soul's participation in the eternal. The soul's participation in the eternal. How do we participate in things of the eternal? I think when we talk of things of the eternal here, when we take back to the context of ancient philosophy, the eternal here was not God of the Judeo-Christian tradition that we know. No. The eternal, if you link back to Plato, was the good. Was the good. When you come back to Plotinus, was the one. Again now, what we are saying here is that the eternal here is a being having the characteristics of God in Judeo-Christian tradition that we know, the eternal. And you also remember that ancient philosophy is the base, is the foundation on which Christian philosophy is labeled. That's why you go back to Christian philosophy, what we call medieval philosophy, and ancient philosophy. You recall that Plato, or you recall that St. Augustine studies Plato, and then St. Thomas Aquinas studied Aristotle. So from there, you can see now the relationship, how the two came with the concept of God. I mean, St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas, they have studied their understanding of that being, of that eternal being, thanks to the understanding of the eternal being in the mind of Aristotle and Plato. So I go back again to the question to what I asked before coming back to this. The Greek philosopher Aristotle stated that the contemplative life consists of the soul's participation in the internal through a union between the soul's rational faculty and the nous that imparts intelligibility to the cosmos. So what we are just saying here is that the contemplative life consists simply in the soul's participation in the eternal. Now, the life of God, or the life or the understanding of God, it consists in our participation in things of God, or with things of God, things of heaven, with things of heaven. When we talk of participatory life, we think of let's go back to the monastery. The monks, they live a contemplative life. What is the essence of the contemplative life lived by them? They contemplate things of the eternal, things of God. And that is what Aristotle is saying, telling us. And we are going to realize that how do we contemplate things of the eternal? We contemplate things of the eternal by studying the science of the good human life. Good human life. Remember that it is only the things of the good that will lead us, or that will take us to now, what are the main focus in what philosophers or the philosophers? Our main focus is moral responsibility. And in this text, Aristotle notes that as a condition to be held.
I don't know what's happening. I can't get anything.
Yes.
There are two elements that must be true for an act to be voluntary. And the first element is that a person must be in control of his action. A person must be in control of his action. And the second one is that a person must be aware of what he is doing. A person must be aware of what he is doing. Therefore, one of the main focus of the Nicomachean ethics is moral responsibility. We know what we are doing. We act. When we are acting, we know. When we know what we are doing, we know the responsibility, we know the counter effects of what we are doing. And therefore, that is the focus of the text we are treating. Moral responsibility. We are touching other areas like what
I don't know. Can't hear anything. Hearing is. I don't know whether I'm the only one facing the problem.
What affects my moral responsibility will be seen, virtues will be seen, but what should do?
I think his network is down, and that's the thing. So I was advising him that we could do the WhatsApp method for now. If people can as well suggest that, I think it will be better.
Yes, I think it's better. It's better we use the WhatsApp method.
Yeah, because this is really slow, and then with the WhatsApp, we can even listen to the lectures after.
That's true.
Yes. But with this one, it's a bit difficult because of the network and things like that. I don't know. But
it depends on it.
Is bad.
Yeah, let me. We have to end the meeting now. I'll end the meeting now and then send another link in the group so that we should use to join. Since we're
okay.
Yeah, our time is.
Thank you.
Let me send another link. Yeah.
Can we just switch to WhatsApp at once?
All right. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's okay. The third philosophical idea or theme or thematic approach of our text, the Nkumakian ethics, is the doctrine of the golden mean. One of the most famous aspects of the ethics is Aristotle's doctrine that virtue exists as a mean state between the virtuous extremes of excess and deficiency. For example, the virtuous mean of courage stands between the vices of rashness and cowardice, which represent excess and deficiency respectively. For Aristotle, this is not a precise formulation, saying that courage is a mean between rashness and cowardice does not mean that courage stands exactly in between these two extremes. Nor does it mean that courage is the same for all people. Aristotle repeatedly reminds us in the Ethics that there are two general laws or exact formulations in the practical sciences. Rather, we need to approach matters in case. We need to approach matters case by case, informed by inculcated virtue and a fair dose of practical wisdom. Aristotle claimed that virtue can be learned only through constant practice. Virtue can be learned only through constant practice implies that there are no set rules we can learn and then obey. Instead, virtue consists of learning through experience what is the mean path relative to ourselves between the vices we may be liable to stumble into. The fourth philosophical idea or theme or thematic approach of the Nicomachean Ethics is the unity of the virtues. The unity of the virtues. For Aristotle, virtue is an all or nothing affair. We cannot decide that we will be courageous and temperate, but choose not to be magnificent. Nor can we call people properly virtuous if they fail to exhibit all of their virtues. Though Aristotle lists a number of virtues, he sees them all as coming from the same source. All as coming from the same source. The stress in this point is the unity of the virtues. All come from the same source. A virtuous person is someone who is naturally disposed to exhibit all the virtues, and a naturally virtuous disposition exhibits all the virtues equally. Our word ethics descends from the Greek word ethos, which means more properly character. And Aristotle's concern in the ethics then is what constitutes a good character. All the virtues spring from a unified character. So no good person can exhibit some virtues without exhibiting them all. Unity of virtues without exhibiting them all. The fifth philosophical idea or theme or thematic approach is the importance of friendship. Aristotle devotes 2 of the 10 books of the Ethics to discussing friendship in all its forms. Happiness, according to Aristotle, is a public affair, not a private one. So with whom we share this happiness is of great significance. The city-states of ancient Greece were tightly knit communities, and in the politics, Aristotle argues that we cannot fully realize our human nature outside the bounds of a Greek city-state. The bonds that tie citizens together are so important that it would be unthinkable to suggest that true happiness can be found in the life of a hermit. The sixth and last philosophical idea or theme or thematic approach in our consideration of the Nicomachean Ethics is the life of contemplation. The life of contemplation. In Book 10, Aristotle ultimately concludes that contemplation is the highest human activity. This is largely a consequence of his teleological view of nature, telos, according to which the telos or goal of human life is the exercise of our rational powers. In discussing the various intellectual virtues, Aristotle extols wisdom as the highest, since it deals with unchanging, universal truths and rests on a synthesis of scientific investigation and the intuitive understanding of the first principles of nature. The activity of wisdom is contemplation. So contemplation must be the highest activity of human life. Good morning once more to everybody. Today, we're going to take one of the most important area of our study of the text. We're going to tackle the philosophical ideas or the themes or a thematic approach to the Nicomachean Ethics. And in our presentation, we're going to have 6 of them. If we are able to master these 6 or to know them, I think we must have achieved our objective in this course. So the first philosophical idea or theme or thematic approach to this text is virtue and happiness. Virtue and happiness. The word happiness, the word happiness in the ethics is a translation of the Greek term eudaimonia or eudaimonia, which carries connotations of success and fulfillment. For Aristotle, this happiness is our highest goal. However, Aristotle does not say that we should aim at happiness, but rather that we do aim at happiness. His goal in the ethics is not to tell us that we ought to live happy, successful lives, but to tell us what this life consists of. Most people think of happiness as physical pleasure or honor, but this is because they have an imperfect view of the good life. The conception of people have frequently does not live up with true happiness because people are generally deficient in virtue. Virtue is a disposition to behave in the right manner, which is inculcated from a young age. A person with the virtue of courage, for instance, will not only show confidence in the face of fear, but will think of this courage as a good thing. Behaving courageously will make the virtuous person happy and will be one part of living a generally good life. By contrast, a person who has been poorly brought up and exhibits the vice of cowardice will find happiness in the avoidance of danger and thus will have an imperfect view of the good life. Our second philosophical idea or theme or thematic approach of the Nicomachean ethics is moral education. Moral education. A question of high importance in any investigation of ethics is how we can teach people to be good. Aristotle is quite clear that he does not think virtue can be taught in a classroom or by means of argument. His ethics, then, is not designed to make people good, but rather to explain what is good, why it is good, and how we might set about building societies and institutions that might inculcate this goodness. According to Aristotle, virtue is something learned through constant practice that begins at a young age. We might understand his outlook better if we recognize the meaning of the word arete, which is rendered as virtue. In most English translations, this term more generally means excellence. So a good horseman can exhibit arete in horsemanship without necessarily implying any sort of moral worth in the horseman. It should be obvious that excellence in horsemanship cannot be learned simply by reading about horsemanship and hearing recent arguments for how best to handle a horse. Becoming a good horseman requires steady practice. One learns to handle a horse by spending a lot of time riding horses. For Aristotle, there is no essential distinction between the kind of excellence that marks a good horse and the kind of excellence that marks a good person generally. Both kinds of excellence requires practice first and theoretical study second. So the teaching of virtue can be only of secondary importance after the actual practice of it.